children. That's the obvious one, right? Even the Catholic Church said it's okay to have sex with your spouse if you intend to have a child. Indeed, that's how God intended for the human race to perpetuate. In Genesis 1 verse 28, God tells Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply. In other words, have kids. My wife Barb and I have two incredible kids, and so I can tell you from experience that sex can result in children. Surprise, surprise. Purpose number 2, protection. And I suspect that won't surprise those of you, at least who had a church background. The Bible has a verse that's often taken out of context, and it runs something to the effect that if you can't handle your sexual temptation or your lust, get married. All right? And like I said, it's often taken out of context. In its broader context, what the verse is saying is that God instituted marriage as the context where we can safely give expression to our sexual desires. So, children, protection. Number 3, oneness. Genesis 2 verse 24 contains a phrase that we hear at a lot of weddings. And I quote, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh, or as one. So God gave the gift of sex so that married couples could develop greater intimacy and oneness. This 4th one is the one that surprised me, and that's sex for comfort. 2 Samuel 12 verse 24 records an instance where David and his wife lost a child. And later, they share their bodies with one another as a way to comfort one another. And then number 5, 5th purpose God gave sex, pleasure. Pleasure. We're going to be working our way through the Song of Songs, and you can't get very far in this book without reading or coming across some very sexually explicit material, and there ain't no mention of kids, if you know what I mean. And I'll show you in a minute what I'm talking about. Now, because the overwhelming majority of you have probably never heard a sermon series or a message from a Bible book called the Song of Songs, actually that's an assumption, so let me just find out. How many of you have heard a message from a pastor or a sermon series in a church on the book of Song of Songs, which is basically in the middle of the Bible? Raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of you, and one little baby over there. All right. So because the others of you have never heard a message or a series on the Song of Songs, let me familiarize you with it before we jump in. The Song of Songs was written by King Solomon. At least that's the most accepted view. And King Solomon was the son of King David and his wife Bathsheba. God gave Solomon extraordinary wisdom. And much of his reign was characterized by wisdom and reverence for God. Although, toward the end of his life, tragically, he became proud and turned from God. In his early days, when his love for God burned bright, Solomon wrote and collected more than 3,000 proverbs, or wisdom sayings, and more than 1,000 songs, of which the book, the Song of Songs, would be one of them. And if you look at verse 1 of chapter 1, it says Solomon's Song of Songs. So this is his best song. This is his greatest hits album. Song of Songs. Solomon frequently visited various parts of his kingdom, and one day as he was visiting some royal vineyards north of Jerusalem, his royal entourage by surprise came upon a beautiful peasant woman who was tending to the vines. Embarrassed, she ran from them. But Solomon couldn't get the image of this peasant woman out of his mind. Later, disguised as a shepherd, he returned to the vineyards and won her love. And then he revealed his true identity as the king of Israel and asked her to return to Jerusalem with him. Solomon and his beloved are being married in the palace as the book, Song of Songs, begins. This is their love song to one another. Song of Songs, chapter 1, verse 1. Solomon's Song of Songs. Now, before we go any further, I want to ask a question. Who starts speaking? Who writes the first verse? Who initiates? Who is the sexual aggressor? Women, how many of you would say the men? A few of you. How many of you would say the women? Wow, almost an equal number. You guys are progressive. And you're right, it's the woman. The woman speaks first, the woman speaks last, and the woman speaks most. Oh. Don't worry, I'll bail the women out later too. No surprise. So this woman has passions, and she has desires, and she's not afraid to voice them. And I thought the married women here would need to know that they have permission to express their passions and desires to their spouse, to their husband as well, but you guys already know that. It doesn't make you dirty, it doesn't make you less holy, it's equally all right for you to initiate with your spouse. So here the woman initiates, and she says in verse 2, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth." Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. And I want to stop there for a second, because this is not some prudish peck. All right? She's talking about deep, passionate kissing. Other translations have multiple kisses as the way they translate this. Full-on mouth kissing. Now, question. What's the first thing that goes out the window when there's conflict in a relationship? I think it's the kissing. A kiss is an indicator of the health of a marriage. It's good to see married couples kiss. It's good for their kids to see them kiss, even though when they do, they will probably say something like, "Yuck," or "Get a room." But it's good for them. It makes them feel a little more secure in their little kid worlds. Continuing on, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine." Your love is more delightful than wine. What's the woman saying here? She's telling her beloved that, in her opinion, his love is more intoxicating and more enjoyable than the best vintage she has ever tasted. And some of you are saying, "The pastor's promoting alcohol." No. If you're an alcoholic, don't drink. If you're underage, don't drink. If it causes you to break the law and sin and do things that you'll later regret, don't drink. If none of these apply to you and you do decide to drink, don't drink cheap wine. You're a Christian. Set your standards higher. Personally, I like full-bodied reds from northern Italy. In the Verona region, they have a category of wine called Masi, M-A-S-I. Anyway, let's go on to verse 3. "Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes." Guys, how's your personal hygiene? You say, who cares? Well, it matters to her, so it should matter to you. And if you're brave, ask your spouse later today, is there anything about my hygiene that you find unattractive?